Karen, let me officially welcome you to Fresh Fiction Virtual Book Club.
And thank you. I'm this is so amazing. I love listening to everybody what they're reading. I kind of remember those days when I had more time to read than I do now, and I'm a little jealous. So
Well, what do you normally read? I mean, when you have time, do you read in your own genre? Do you read across all sorts of things, or what?
I read across all sorts of things. I don't read Southern fiction. Now, this series is not really what I'm known for. I'm really known for more, meteor Southern women's fiction books, and these the series kind of took off, and I don't know what you call these books, but so I don't read Southern women's fiction. I'm really into the domestic dramas now. Like right now I'm reading Paul, Laura Dave, The Last Thing He Told Me. And I'm also listening, like when I get dressed and drive and stuff, to Lisa Unger's Confessions on the 745, because those really sort of, keep me awake. I fall asleep very easily. I'm on a big Kristen Hanna fix right now. I just finished listening to, and I was on book tour in May, to the Great Alone, the one about Alaska. And then I've just started, but I think I'm going to have to wait until I finish my current book that I'm working on, because, Kristen's books are this big, but I prefer to read hers in paper. And that one is, and I have it sitting over there and I can't see it. It's the one set during the Four Winds, and also in my favorite author, and she just had a new book come out, and it's sitting there. I can see it on my little table by my reading chair, and that is Homecoming by Kate Morton. So she writes kind of like the type of books that I'm known for, except she sets hers in Australia, or not, or England, or someplace that's not here. So.
And I always love it when you have those books. It's like, okay, I so want to read that, but I don't want to pick it up yet because I need to devote the right amount of time without distractions.
Right. So that, like I save, 30 minutes a day, but I have to write like 5 pages before I allow myself to like do anything else, like, read or whatever. And then, I kind of enjoy if I have to, like go to a Pilates class or go to the grocery store or whatever, then I'm like, yes. And then I can turn on my, my audiobook, or when I'm getting dressed in the morning, put on the audiobook. So yeah, that's sort of how I'm able to get some of my reading in anyway. I still miss just, remember those days, summer school holidays, where all you did was read.
Oh,
I miss
yes.
that.
Or like a
Wow.
rainy day, so there's not really anywhere you need to go, but just curl
Right.
up on the couch, listen to the rain outside,
Or
and just get
calling
lost
sick,
in
but I'm self-employed, so that doesn't work. So who would I call? It's like you got a deadline. No, it doesn't matter.
Okay, that is a downside. Yes. Yep. Well, let's back up a couple steps. For readers who aren't familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you first start writing?
So I was an avid reader, and I used to read pretty much everything, from the encyclopedias to, I cut my reading teeth on Nancy Drew, right? And then I went to Laura Ingalls Wilder, the Little House in the Big Woods series, which I was obsessed with. And then I kind of read everything, even, books from my dad's bookshelf, like, Winston Churchill's memoirs and Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. So I had a very broad reading background growing up. And we lived in London for 7 years, and I was a very in-demand babysitter. So I had a lot of spare change. And I took the tube to school every day, and right on my way to the tube station was a bookstore. I want to say it was a Walden, or their equivalent of Walden Books, or I can't even remember, but it was a bookstore. And oh my gosh, I mean, that's when, because remember the big sagas? James, was it John
James,
Jakes? Remember the
yes.
Americans? And Rosemary Rogers and Kathleen Woodwis. I know one of the readers here, it was reading one of those. And just Taylor Caldwell, Captains and the Kings. I mean, all those really rich sagas I just adored. Um, but even though my teachers always told me I should be a writer, I had absolutely no interest in being a writer, did not want to be a writer. And that was because back in the day, when you were asked to do a writing assignment, it all had to be, in cursive. And unfortunately, I would be told, write a 5-page mystery. And in my head, I'd be getting all excited, like, oh, I can't wait. I've got this great story in my head. And then I start writing it. And I quickly would get frustrated because my handwriting couldn't keep up with this wonderful idea. And I would like lose track. And just towards the end of it, I would just get frustrated. And I would always get A+ in content and an F in penmanship. And even now, my penmanship is pretty horrible. I could have been a doctor if I weren't a writer. But my teacher, Mrs. Anderson, my 6th grade teacher, said, you should be a writer. And I would be like, oh, God, who would ever want to do that? So, I went to business school at Tulane. I was a business major. I graduated with honors. And my husband's like very surprised because I can't balance the checkbook. But, I don't need to. He's the banker. I just let him deal with it. But I worked in the business world, got married, and then I had 2 kids. And when my first child was born, we moved, so I had to leave my job anyway. And then my second child was born, 21 months later. So I was a stay-at-home mom, and it was all great. Luckily, I was fortunate enough that I could do that. And then my sister-in-law sent me a book called Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Some of you may have heard of it. And she told me, she says, before you start reading this, go ahead and buy the next 3, because at the time there were only 4 books in the series. Go ahead and buy the next 3 because it'll be 2 a.m. and you'll be really upset that when you finish that book that you don't have the next one ready to go. And I did as she told me, and she was absolutely right. I mean, I remember, my kids were little, and I'd take them to the park and put them on the swings, and I would, hold the book out like this, and I'd be pushing them in the other hand. And, 6 hours later, they'd be like, Mommy, it's cold. We're hungry. It's dark. It's raining. Can we go home? And I'd be like, just one more page. But what happened? I had a book hangover, and we're all readers here. You know what that's like when you read a really, really fabulous book and you just cannot put it down. And that's how it was. And you keep rereading it because you can't pick up another book, even though you've got stacks and stacks of books waiting to be read, and you just can't do it. And I literally, heard Mrs. Anderson in my ear saying, you should be a writer. And I thought, ugh, well, if I don't tell anyone, it doesn't count. And I'm just going to start. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to start, because I'm sure I'll get tired after a while, and then that'll just get it out of my system, and then I can start reading again. So I just started writing the kind of book that I would want to read. And that's still how I approach my books. I started with the main character, her internal and external conflicts, and the setting. And I just started writing, and it, I had a page, then I had 2 pages, then I had a chapter, and I had 2 and then I ended up writing a whole book. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, and I entered it into a writing contest where Diana Gabaldon was a finalist judge, or not a finalist judge, semi-finalist judge, because if you made it to the semifinals, and that's why I entered it, she would give you a written critique. Well, I ended up winning. So not only did I get that critique from her, but I also wanted, the finalist judge was a New York literary agent, and she offered to represent me. So that's how I sold my first book.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
still in print, by the way. Yeah. And that was 2000. My gosh, that was 23 years ago. So yeah,
And
I mean, obviously I started when I was a tiny baby, but
of course, definitely, yes. Not disputing that at all. But what was that like of having Diana then be one of the judges when it sounds like that was
she
part of
wasn't a judge. She wasn't a judge. Just if you had made it to that level, then she would do the critique for who, and I guess there were different categories. So I can't remember what category my book was in, but she was that critiquer, I guess, for my category. So that's how I won the critique. And then I ended up winning the whole contest. So, I guess she might have read the finalists in my category, and then another round of judging selected the winner. So, yeah.
So what was that like, having her provide you that feedback when she was such a
Oh,
catalyst to really get you
it was really
right?
incredible. I mean, she's so smart and she's so talented. I mean, I've met her several times now, and she really is just an incredibly nice person. But she was so encouraging and very, her criticism was very constructive. It was, very helpful. And I mean, it really gave me the confidence to say, well, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe I do, because Dinah says this was pretty good, so it can't be that bad. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
And what was the inspiration behind not only the current series with the Royal Street, but the previous, since this is a spinoff? I mean, what was
Right.
the ideas behind this?
Well, very interesting. So I had written, I guess at that point, I can't even remember, like 15 Southern women's fiction novels. And I was, I'd hit the New York Times list, in the top 10. I was doing well. I was growing my audience. It was great. I loved writing what I was writing. And it was all going really, really well. But I'm just one of those people. I cannot just, let sleeping dogs lie. I kept remembering how, when I was a kid, how much I loved reading series. And listening to a lot of the people here tonight, there's something very, very lovely about seeing, falling in love with characters and not having to say goodbye to them at the end of the book, right? And I'm a firm believer in stretching my writing muscles. I mean, I also write collaborations with two other best-selling authors, and that was also something way out of the box. But I think to keep you in your game, at the top of your game, you need to continually challenge yourself. And I was thinking in 2004, I wonder if I could write a series. Like, I wonder what that would be like. And so I wasn't, I was working on another book at the time. And so this is kind of in the back of my head. And I was just thinking, well, to write a series, you really have to come up with a main protagonist that is interesting enough and flawed enough that can carry an entire series. And and I kept on bouncing ideas around in my head. And then one day, January 2005, I'm taking a shower and the character of Melanie Middleton jumps into my head. I mean, it was like slap. And I knew immediately everything I needed to know about her. One, that she was OCD. Two, that she loved ABBA. Three, she was a realtor who specialized in historic real estate. But she hated old houses because old houses always came with a past resident who was no longer living. But unfortunately for her, she had been born with the ability to communicate with spirits. And so what she would normally do as a child to make them go away, she would just start singing ABBA very loudly, and doing this. And she continued to do that into adulthood. And then she inherits an old house. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is so different from anything I've written. Why? And I told my agent about it, and she's like, okay, this is very different, Karen, but I think this is really cool. Write some chapters. And so I did. She sent it to my editor at Berkeley, and my editor's like, okay, very different, Karen, but love it. So keep going. So I did. And the book at that time, and so I got my family for spring break that April 2005 to go to New Orleans because I'd gone to college there, but that had been in the 19 mumbles. Okay, the 80s. So it had been a while. And so, and I wanted to refresh because things change, everything changes. And so we did ghost tours and walking tours and history tours and house tours and swamp tour. We did everything just to sort of, and of course, because I believe in suffering for my craft, we ate at lots of restaurants so I could authentically write about those meals. And I was ready, set to go. I'd started writing that first chapter in August. And the name of that book was The House on Prytania. And then we all know what happened in August of 2005. And that was a little storm called Katrina, which I cannot believe that was 18 years ago this past August. Yesterday, right? 2 days ago. Just, you know, but
Which
and I knew immediately that, yeah, I knew immediately that something that big could not be squeezed into the backstory of the series that I had planned. It just, I would go back and write a Southern women's fiction novel, The Beech Trees, that is actually my biggest seller. That is sort of an homage to surviving storms. There's a lovely two love stories because it's pre-Hurricane Camille, which was 1969, and post-Katrina, 2005, set in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and New Orleans. And there's, you know, again, these stories that go back and forth, but I knew for this series that Katrina couldn't, it couldn't be a secondary character. So I had to come up with another great Southern city with lots of history and beautiful architecture, and of course ghosts. And that's how I came up with Charleston. And so I just moved Melanie and, you know, the story that I had planned to Charleston, and it worked out beautifully. I did 7 books. They were very successful. And of course, when I got to the last one, my editor was like, would you consider doing a spinoff? And I thought, great, it's time to return to the beginning, right? And let's move everybody to, you know, let's move the spinoff to New Orleans, and let's have you know, a younger character that I can torture for years and years and years, because the main character Nola is only 26. You know, and then I could write as many as my readers would like. So that's how this series came about.
I love that you're able to go back, like you said, back to the beginning then, and still bring a version of that story to life.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and with New Orleans being the city it is, and how it's changed over the years, it becomes its own character, really, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Charleston became its own character too. You know, and Charleston and New Orleans have so many similarities. You know, I like to, I mean, I love both. I always refer to New Orleans though as sort of Charleston's, you know, younger, sassier sister, you know, the one who wears Daisy Dukes and halter tops. So, but I love them both. But yeah, they're both to me, in all of my books, not just my series books, the setting is much a main character as the actual people are. And, you know, New Orleans and Charleston, they both, you know, are their own characters. So.
Well, I also want to touch on the collaborations that you mentioned that you do with Beatrice and Lauren. We had Lauren a few weeks ago also with our virtual book club. So how did you become part of that, and what do you find that you get out of that collaboration, which is different from your standalone books?
Oh, totally different. Again, it's, you know, I think no matter what you do in life, you have to take chances. You have to step out of your box to just re-energize yourself, either creatively or spiritually or whatever. And it just so happened, you know, it was actually at an RWA conference, and after the big ball, or whatever they used to call it, awards dinner or award ceremony, the 3 of us walked into a bar. That's basically it. Three writers walked into a bar, and we knew each other. We knew each other's books. We read each other's books, and we're fans, even though we write very different things. But we sat down and we just started talking. We just had a blast. We realized how much we had in common, and our approach to life in the world, you know, was very, very similar. And our love for bad sheep puns. The sheep puns were just flying. And so we, you know, there may have been some alcohol consumed. And I know the idea came up, you know, my gosh, we would have so much fun if we could get a publisher to pay for our girls' trip and our bar bill. And, you know, all we would have to do is write a book together. And that is literally how it all started, which is kind of amazing, because then when we got together, like at first, you know, we were all thinking we're joking, right? And then when we each got home to our different corners of the world, we were like, that could be really interesting. And next thing I know, I'm on a flight up to New York. The three of us met and we're like, okay, let's do it. And we just sat down, and after like 3 or 4 hours, we had plotted an entire novel, which is weird because the three of us on our own do not plot out our books. But when you're writing with other
Right.
people, you have to. And we were just in love with the story and the characters. And it was just this magical thing. And did we write it and then sell it? Or did we sell it? Isn't that funny? Lauren and Beatrice would remember. Um, we sold it to my publisher, and it was my editor. And like we had no idea. Again, we had no. And maybe that's the secret here for any of you who want to be a writer. It doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing. Obviously, I keep doing it. So yeah, we started right. We write round robin. The first person, wrote the first chapter, sent it to the next person, and it went on until the end. And when it was done, we were like, oh my gosh, we have a book. And sent it into the editor. She loved it. We went on book tour. It hit the New York Times list, and a surprise to everyone, especially us, because we didn't know what we were doing. And it was so creatively invigorating that we have now done it 4 times. Well, we just finished the 5th one, and that will be out in September of next year. And it is the most fun writing you could ever have because you have your BFFs who have your back. Like when you're writing by yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, so I'm stuck. What happens next? And you ask the question and you just hear crickets. But when you're writing with 2 writing partners, the text goes up. Okay, wait a minute. I'm so stuck. What happens next? And then it's this dialogue, and it's like you get answers, and and yeah, our book tours are like literally the most fun book tours ever. We have an absolute blast. And if you've ever spoken to anybody who's ever come to see us on book tour, it's a show. It's a whole show.
Well, I'll definitely have to sign up for that. Catch you in
Yes,
person.
definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, Karen, I want to switch over to what we call our fresh fiction facts. These are a series of usually short questions, answers that come to the top of your head, not meant to stump you, but
Oh,
it's
good.
been known to happen, okay? So to start off easy, and again, sticking with the New Orleans theme, where is your favorite place to eat when you're in New
In New
Orleans?
Orleans, oh gosh, I have to say the Camellia Grill, maybe because it just
Right.
brings back so
Yes.
many happy memories from college. Oh my gosh. You
Oh,
go
yes.
there at 3 a.m., get your chili cheese omelet, go next door through the drive-through daiquiri. I mean, it's
Oh,
like,
yes.
yeah. Oh, I mean, you really can't go wrong any place in New Orleans. From high end, I love, the Antoines and Commanders and all of that, but you
But
can't go wrong
everybody
with
knows
either.
there,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
Camellia Grill is the one that's off the beaten path that
Yeah.
the students
Right
and
there in the
locals
river
know.
bend.
Yes. Many a meal there, definitely.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Who would you most want to be stuck in an elevator with?
Hmm. Ryan Reynolds. No, I think he's so funny. He's happily married. I love Blake Lively too. So, I wouldn't be like making the moves. I'm happily married. I wouldn't be making moves. He just seems so funny. Him or Paul Rudd, I think they have very similar personalities. So
Hey, if you're going to be stuck, at least you're entertained, right?
exactly. That's how I figure it.
Yes. Hey, you've been kidnapped, but they return you 2 hours later because you will not stop talking about what?
How hungry I am.
Ooh. Well,
Yeah, like I
kind of
need to be fed
straightforward.
regularly, okay? So, or and at least given an injection of caffeine, okay? Or it's going to get ugly. They will so bring me back.
So then what is your writing fuel to keep you going? Is it
Coffee,
coffee?
coffee, 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 and pistachios, which my dog knows. She knows what the sound of that bag sounds like, and she'll come right there. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so with the pistachios then, shelled, unshelled, because I would think if you've got to unshell them, wouldn't that disrupt the writing?
Correct. So, yes, when I'm driving or when I'm driving, for a long period of time, you need a snack, definitely the unshelled because they sell them unshelled, which is really cool. But if I'm eating lunch, and I'm taking a break, then I go for the shelled. So I keep both bags in my pantry.
Okay. Because that's my thing when I'm working. It's like, okay, what is that thing I can just grab, which is a bad,
Exactly.
right? Because it is becomes spineless, but
Right. Right. And they don't make a mess because when you open them, the shells make that huge mess. So the clean ones are
yeah.
good. Yeah. And mints, I will admit too that, especially when I'm writing, my mother will just roll over in her grave if I to admit this in public, but I will chew gum while I'm writing,
Oh,
like loud and obnoxiously. And I won't do it in
smacking all the
public.
way.
I, I was raised better than that. But yesterday I was like chomping it, and my husband walked in. He's like, "Oh God, that's just." As a matter of fact, I was chewing a piece right before I got up. So I'm so sorry. But it's because I don't want to eat anything because I just had dinner. But but I still want to chew on something, and so there you go. Yeah,
Well,
but
okay,
not
what
in
is a movie that
public.
not in public? So
Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay. As long as it's not in public, we'll let it go. What's a movie that you can watch multiple times and still enjoy?
Oh, Gone with the Wind. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah. And at Christmas time, Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase. My
Oh.
family and I, it's like our ritual, and we've all memorized all the dialogue. So yeah, we take
And are
turns.
those movies that you find you have to start at the beginning, or if you just find it on TV, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Let me jump right in because I know this scene is coming up. And
It really depends because I don't have a lot of time anymore. I will, if I see it on TV, I will just start watching. But when it's like at Christmas time, the way my family kicks off the Christmas season is Thanksgiving night. We watch from the beginning Christmas Vacation. Always, Gone with the Wind is like, if I have a friend over or my sister-in-law, and we have time, we will sit and watch it from the beginning.
Mhm. It's been a while since I've sat and watched the whole thing through. And
Yeah,
there
it's
was a
four
period where,
hours. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
4
would
hours.
catch it and then I'd
It's a
watch the end and
commitment.
I'd fall and, I'd cry every single
Oh,
time.
every time. I always make sure I have the tissues because when Melanie dies, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I
And
hope
then
I'm
I'm
not,
crying
no
every
spoilers here, but
yeah. Yep. Classic. Along those lines, what is your most dog-eared or reread book?
Gone with the Wind. Yeah. It actually Gone with the Wind and To Kill a Mockingbird, both of those, because they're just, yeah, yeah. Gone with the Wind for, different reasons, I guess, but they both like just grabbed me. And I read them both in seventh grade, and I read them each multiple times ever since.
And do you find, okay, so reading those when you were so young, do you find when you've reread them as you're older that you're getting different things out of them or you're noticing things that you didn't
Oh,
catch
most
before?
definitely. And in a positive way. I mean, there's some books that were old favorites that you don't want to go back and read because they're not going to stand the test of time. My daughter made the mistake of rereading the entire Nancy Drew series that she inherited from me. I guess a summer in high school, and she was like, "Mom, the inconsistencies." It's like she's like, so anyway, and there are some books I know, like I've tried to read some of my favorite old romances, like my earlier romances, and I guess now that I'm a jaded married woman, mother of two, they just don't have the same appeal to me anymore, which is sad. So I'm very careful about which books I choose to read because I prefer to have fond memories versus, you know, not liking an old
Right.
favorite.
Mhm. Well, what is the most unexpected piece of advice that you ever received?
Interesting. Trying to think. People are usually afraid to give me advice because I take offense. um, Um, trying to think. Oh, my dad was right. My dad was right. He told me when I was in college, I'd started dating a guy I was crazy about. And, I told my dad a little bit about him. And my dad said, and, this was in the 80s. So maybe this sounds very old fashioned. And, my dad was, Southern Baptist, born during the Depression, right? But he said, never date a person you couldn't see yourself marrying. And I was like, because that's how a lot of us get into trouble, like you're infatuated with somebody, even though they're not Mr. Right. And they will never be Mr. Right. They might be Mr. Right now, but they're not Mr. Right. And you just kind of lie to yourself and think that, oh no, this is it. This is it. And my dad was right. My dad was totally right about this person. And just made me analyze the relationship a little closer.
Well, the most important question out of all of these, where is the best way for readers to stay up with what you're working on and keep in touch?
Definitely, my website. I send everybody to my website. On my homepage is the links to my social media pages. I'm fairly active on Instagram and Facebook. So definitely, and that would be Karen-White.com. And the dash is the little dash like this. Not KarenWhite.com, because back in the day it was a British porn star, so I had to put the dash in there. And luckily she was blonde, so there was, people wouldn't get confused. But yeah, that's the best way. And there's a little button on there that says contact Karen, and that email goes directly to me. And I do answer my emails. It sometimes takes me longer than other times, depending on what's going on. But I do respond.
Great. And so the House of Prytania Street came out, and you're expecting another collaboration to come out with Beatrice and Lauren in
September of 2024.
Right?
And then I'll have the third book in this series will be out in 2025. And finally, my next big single title will also be out in 2025. I had to take a little bit of a hiatus. I had, within 9 months, I had both my parents pass and my daughter got married. So, trying to find that mind space for writing, it just got kind of like, it's life. We all go through it. And, sadly, it happened very quickly and back to back. So yes, but 2025 will be a banner year, God willing, and the creek don't rise, as we like to say.
Well, lots to look forward to with that. And Karen, thank you again so much for joining us tonight, but stick
Thank
around for
you.
the happy hour with the rest of our readers.
Sure, this was fun. Thanks so much for having me.